This is The Great Equalizer, a parenting podcast about the realities of being a mom
or dad
in the 2020s. We are your hosts, Sam
and Charlene,
and we believe we're all rocking the same kind of crazy.
So let's get real, let's get honest, and let's have a laugh about the ups and downs of our current upside down. Hashtag no judgies.
This episode of The Great Equalizer is sponsored by Timeless Wellness.
Timeless Wellness is your ultimate online destination for Pilates and rebounding classes that elevate your mind, body, and soul.
On this episode of The Great Equalizer, we proudly hit 100 episodes.
And we talk about how being a mother is at once the most important and least important job in the world.
And we also catch up with our favorite author, Ashley Audrain, about her latest book, The Whispers.
Hello!
Happy 100 episodes to us. Hey! And more, actually.
Yes.
Because we've got bonus content. We've done a lot.
Yes. Although it feels like this project is always like, I feel like it's not that we don't prioritize it. It's just like in the triage situation that is life and parenting, it's always the last of the list, like just before self-care almost, which is just non-existent.
It is our self-care, though.
That's true. It's true. It's therapy.
Yeah, it is our self-care. It's our identity. It's even though it's about motherhood, creating this podcast is kind of a nod to who we are as people outside of being moms.
Yes.
In an ironic way, because we talk about being moms because it's so all-encompassing.
It's our coffee catch-up that we get to do
it's our
once
coffee
in never.
catch-up that we record for
people to
everybody else
listen
to sit and have
coffee with us. Yes, that's what it is.
And look at us.
100 times so we have had this coffee catch-up and more because of bonus content.
Yeah, and how do you think it's changed? I don't feel like, I mean, obviously we're in a studio.
Yes.
We have makeup on.
We don't have just like mom buns and mom bums.
Mom
we also
bums.
have mom bums. We don't just have mom buns and like gym kit on. Yes.
Well, yeah, because we're very much aware that now
people are looking at
can
us.
see us. And
yes.
we always took points of pride in the fact that we're podcasters. It doesn't matter what we look like. We can have a radio face. Ta-da! So that we've come so far in that respect. We've moved over onto video. We're moving along with the times.
Yes.
Well,
we try.
I don't know. I still feel like the same person, but when I think about the Sam that started, because, okay, we started 2018. We're now in 2024. Help me with my maths.
Yeah. You're asking me.
6
19,
years?
20, 21, 22,
are we turning
23,
6
24.
this year?
Yes, we are. Yes, because Jessie just turned 6 and she was 6 months old or 5.5 months old when we started, recorded that first episode on the floor in Elijah's room on your phone.
Yes. And subsequently at my kitchen table in our cavernous lounge area.
Yes, yes.
And sometimes sneakily at the German restaurant. Do you
remember that? We recorded at the German restaurant in Randburg.
In Randburg, yeah.
Thanks, Schraube, whatever the name is of your restaurant.
Remember when your car caught on fire?
Great sauerkraut and schnitzel. Highly recommend.
Do you remember when your car caught on fire? Or a car caught on fire behind your car?
Yes, in the parking lot.
And they came and the waiters came and ran in and interrupted our recording, and they were just like, your car's on fire.
I forgot about that. You know, we recorded our first sex episode in the German restaurant. What the actual fuck, Sam?
We just did what we could, and I like have it in my head that first sex episode of like we're struggling to touch base even then.
Yeah.
And we just did the fucking thing. It's
almost ridiculous how stereotypically it is mothering and parenthood, this project. It's this baby that we had. And it's a lot less demanding than an actual human baby, thankfully so.
Yes.
There's also a lot less criticism from the actual baby back at us, which I'm grateful for. I mean, the audience can criticize all they like, but the actual baby just loves us. It never talks back.
No.
It never asks me why my belly's still so big, even though I don't have a baby in it anymore. It doesn't do any of those things, you know?
Yeah, it's just grateful when we manage to give it some time.
Yes, just open arms happily receives us.
It's our little orphaned baby that we lock up in the cupboard from time. Like, it's too busy. It's too busy. We're just going to shelve this baby.
Yes.
Put it under lock and key. We haven't forgotten about you, but like
we still love you. We do. Love you. In fact, we love you probably more than most other things that we do.
It's hard, and I think like if we were able to drink champagne in the middle of the day, we would have a bottle of champers here to toast to the fact that we keep on showing up, because that's the whole thing about consistency, podcasting in particular. And just being there for yourself as a mom, it is all just about the little snippets that you can get.
I think also
in a consistent way.
When we started out, there was because we didn't know what we were doing or what we were. We had an idea of you had a very specific idea of what we were creating. I was in that. I mean, my kid was 6 months old, and I was just like, Sam, I'm just going to blindly trust you here and go with whatever you need me to do. You tell me where I need to be and what I need to be talking about. That I can do. I can talk about motherhood and my life. That I can comfortably do. Outside of that, I don't know what else to give you. And so I think that as the show has progressed and our mothering journey, our lives have changed and evolved, and I'm grateful that we were able to say, okay, hold on a minute. Maybe the initial plan of it looking like a cookie cutter, isn't that just motherhood? Like, I'm not going to use dummies. I'm not going to co-sleep.
Wooden toys, pastel colors only.
Isn't it just like stereotypically life and motherhood that you have to be able to ebb and flow? It's not linear. You have to be able to pivot. I mean, then there was, not to rehash this old thing again, but the pandemic. Like, what's going to happen to the show during the pandemic? How are we going to get together?
There was a time that we recorded where I had a conversation with our fellow content creator, Afro Daddy, who we've had on the show, friend of the show, often speak to. And I was like, hey, Terrence, what up? How do you record telephonic interviews? Because we would have people sit with us at my kitchen table in quote-unquote studio, as we do now. We prefer to have a guest in studio rather than over Zoom now. But Zoom didn't really exist. It wasn't a thing prior to the pandemic. And luckily, shout out to Rode, we had our Rodecaster a year in. But before that, we actually had to have a person in studio, or we had to go with it's called a Zoom device or Zoom mic. I had to go record externally and replay the interview
and pull
afterwards.
in that sound, and we would sit at your kitchen table and like
listen to that,
and then respond to, so that it is a natural, authentic response as well in our conversation.
So how funny, like technology's grown, podcasting's grown, the industry's grown. We now have Zoom. So that's one thing we can thank the pandemic for, but also we really had to think hard about consistency and how often we would be recording.
Able to put content out.
We often say in podcasting, like back when it started, people were doing weekly open-ended episodes open-ended seasons, not like 6 episodes per season, season 1, 2, 3, which is like a better way of structuring things.
Yeah, and in hindsight, looking back now, we were just like, we created the show and it's just like ongoing topics that just go, content never expires, the one doesn't necessarily follow into the other one. And so podcasting, as it has evolved, lots of people do season 1 and then they focus on a specific topic or journey, and then they do season 2. And so there's different formats.
It's a better management way of doing things, but it didn't really exist when we started, which like, I'm proud of us for having been, can I dare say, like one of the OGs, especially in South Africa, of just paving the way and being the front runner in this, and like, holy crap, I don't know what I'm doing, and no one in South Africa has really done a mothering podcast.
Yes.
Right now there are many, and thank goodness for that.
Yes.
And we welcome other podcasters. It's such a wonderful community. But it was really frightening at times to be doing this, but also exciting because you get to make the rules, and to an extent we still get to kind of make the rules and be like, hey, now there's like, we're trying to establish industry standards, and then
also a big part of it where if I look at it not just from a project and like our therapy and our coffee sessions, if I look at it as a business, or which I don't often do, I hardly ever do, because it didn't start out that way, and it isn't what it was for us. But then if I think of certain goals that I aspire to for this project, then I feel like we've had so many years in this and I haven't managed to get that off the ground, and I feel so passionate about so many things that we could add to the show externally to just the audio and the video and so on. But I think it is also the purpose behind it is still to serve with our conversations. Because that's the thing that matters here, is that people keep coming back to hear what we're talking about, which I sometimes can't believe. But then I listen back to old episodes and I'm just like, that's why they fucking keep coming back. Because what we're talking about, I feel it in my deepest of feels still.
You know, so I always joke that when I had Elijah in 2017, creatively, it was this need to put something out creatively, from, a writer's point of view and someone who wants to create things and make things.
And being used to deadlines and every week, and we're going to meet, and the script will be ready by such a time. And
I wanted to be motivated for that by that, so I created something with you in the Great Equalizer. We talk about it being our baby. So kind of with Elijah, post-birth was the Great Equalizer, and with Noah, the Great Equalizer carried on, but I picked up a creative writing degree, and in the creative writing degree, as we sit and workshop what we're doing, they talk about when something really hits home and is emotive, it's when the writer is generous in what they're saying. They're not held back, and it's very frightening to be the person, because you kind of share your text with the other people in the class, not yet with the public, and you sit around the seminar table and you have to keep quiet while
you get criticized or critiqued, essentially.
Yeah, they crit your work. It is so hard, and I've often been in tears before, after, during the seminars. It's so hard to hear that crit on your work.
Because you pour your heart and soul into it.
So I feel like the difference and the beauty in what we do with the Great Equalizer is we are very generous, and it's easy to be so because essentially it is just a conversation among friends.
From our hearts, genuinely our experiences and what we're feeling.
And I think
we don't really hold back because it's impossible.
As long as we continue to do that, then it's worth it. And I think it makes for really great conversation, which we don't necessarily realize. Like, we're not going to realize in this moment when we record, oh, hey, this is impactful. It's really only when we get the quiet in-between moments, emails, messages from other mothers, voice notes of people crying.
Yes. After having listened to an episode
that we recorded 2 years back. And I'm just grateful to us for having been generous in that moment. We're essentially putting our asses on the line. I'm sure there's plenty of people who have been like, they're really crap moms, actually.
Yes, or don't agree with our opinions.
Human beings.
Or,
look at what they did, but we're honest.
Then I'm an awful human being. That is,
so be it.
This is the life. This is the life I'm leading, and I can't be ashamed of it because I really am doing my fucking best. And what you always say this. What a beautiful snapshot into these memories, these times of our lives, this time capsule of our our journey as we evolve as mothers, women, human beings, parents, friends, all of the above, wives.
So in all that we've done, have you got a favorite moment or a favorite recording, favorite episode or guest?
That's really hard. That's like asking which is your favorite child. I will say there's a couple of highlights for me. Like, you know how you think back about, oh, remember when Jessie used to say lello instead of yellow? You know, you remember those little things from their babiness, you know? I think that first episode will always stand out to me, us on the floor in Elijah's room and the phone and like just having an honest conversation. And then at the end, like me looking at you and going, what now? You're like, I don't know what now, but we'll figure it out. That was the one. Another one was when you were doing house renovations and the hardy dolls were screaming in the background. And there was drilling and all sorts going on.
And the man comes and interrupts, and I looked at him. It was like the guy doing the gas installation of our gas geyser. And he
How funny that there's a gas delivery currently happening at your home right now.
Just the guy doing the gas geyser, and I almost beheaded him in the moment. I was so like, I don't have a chance to just...
And I remember
do what I want to do.
I remember the editing happening still on GarageBand.
GarageBand.
And you're like, Ray, I can't get this. How does this function work? I remember you asking him for that. And then also that episode was about lowering our expectations.
Boy, were we right in that.
Yes. That I like that. And then another episode that stands out to me is you and I just giggling at each other when you said, Jesus, take the wheel.
So that's one of my favorite moments, is because there was an episode and we were also similarly like kicked out of the kitchen table scenario and had to record in Elijah's room. He had a bed
on his bed, yes, with books, holding our mic stands on some of his hardcover books so the mics won't fall over.
Yes. And we had a sponsor for that episode who advised us that best practice is probably not to swear.
Yes.
That people aren't very receptive to that, which I took on as constructive criticism and subsequently ignored. But in the moment...
but I mean, I think you said shit. I don't think there was like major, usual foul-mouthed.
And even like subsequently ignored like after that, where we were just like, you know what? It is ingrained in our DNA. It is TGE.
I can't go to coffee with you, Sam, and not say fuck. That's never going to happen. It's not realistic.
I hear it from sponsors, and we might heed the call in future where we'll
be respectful of your brand and your requirements if you pay for the space on our show.
That was the first instance of having to hold back and think carefully about what I was saying. And
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
I remember it clearly that we were talking about Mother's Day.
Yes.
And how the moms in the nursery school, there was a class mom, and she put together a Mother's Day package for the teachers. And I was like, and I wanted to say, fuck that shit. I'm the mom. I deserve to be celebrated. I'm having a hard time. And there were other things where I think the ball was dropped. And
it was, didn't you screw up the Baker's Day, little cones in the oven?
It was the Baker's Day episode.
Yes.
So I tried to make this Pinterest-worthy
Baker's Day treat.
And I really
failed miserably.
Fucked that up like badly. I still get the memory of that Baker's Day, and I'm like, man, store-bought all the way, baby.
And you were like, in that moment, just exasperated and at a loss.
Yeah, so it was Elijah's first Baker's Day. He was 2. I really want, and I was aiming for gluten-free, sugar-free icing. It was xylitol icing. I had practiced 2 or 3 times with cupcakes with my family, like ahead of it.
And it worked out.
No, it didn't. It was a fuck up. Like it worked out.
I think
it was just like
I think
really
in this
ugly.
conversation, I did say to you, if it didn't work out before, how did you imagine it was going to work out on that day?
No, they were. I thought I improve with time. Like each iteration of these sugar-free,
like every
gluten-free
pancake gets a little bit better as you make them. Yes,
but I never did it in the cone before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you this is guys, listeners, viewers. This is what I was imagining. You have cones that look like ice creams, but it's actually a cupcake. It was going to be lovely, and it turned out not.
In Samtopia.
And in Samtopia. And I practiced really hard for this performance, and it failed. And Elijah didn't care. He doesn't even remember his first Baker's Day. But they were sugar-free and gluten-free and all the rest, which is also an expectation that I didn't have to put on myself. Then on top of that, in the same week, we get this message: please donate X amount for
the Mother's Day, or the teacher's gifts
for
or
the
something.
teacher. And as I'm relaying the story to you in the episode, I'm like, I can't say fuck. So I was just like, and in the moment I was just silence. Jesus, take the wheel.
Instead of saying, fuck this shit.
Charlene's reaction, your reaction was...
I don't know why I found it so hilarious. It was, I think we were both equally exhausted in that moment, and I felt you so deeply, and that you're spiraling out of control, and there is a higher power that needs to descend on this situation right now.
Just take hold of my sugar-free cupcakes.
Just take over and do something, because I do not know what the fuck I'm doing.
There was that, and there was also like unexpected things that I say that you laugh at, which brings me great joy. The day that I took a Nando's burger to the school picnic. Which, I'm like, we had the same school picnic this year. And I was like, why don't we go get Nando's? No, we've got to get something we can share, for fuck's sakes. You can't sit.
You are a delight. You are a delight. I mean, it makes sense.
Doesn't it make sense to bring something to a picnic that you'll eat and that you know your kid's going to eat? Why not? At these school picnics.
Oh my God.
The kids, and it happened again. You have these 2-3-year-olds walking over onto your blanket like, what do you have? And it's just like, fuck off, my Nando's.
I made broth in my warm cup because I am looking after my health, kind of thing.
We need to give context to that.
Yes.
Shall we?
Yes, sure.
Shall we go there? At this picnic, there are some very beautiful moms who are quite observant of their health and bodies and gym program, and they look a way that I probably will
never look for this reason.
Because when I packed for the school picnic this year, I heeded the call of never packing Nando's again. And I didn't want pizza. So we bought woolly sandwiches and cut them up and laid them on a tray to share. And I went and got glow sticks at the front for my boys because it becomes nighttime and all the kids have glow sticks. And on the way back, I noticed these beautiful moms in their gym kits. They had Stanley, not the big Stanley cups, but like Stanley thermoses. And they had, one of them had made for each other. One of them had made for the two of them broth. And I was like, well, that's why you look the way you do. And I'm over here shoving woolly samis into my pie hole. You know, so yeah, there are many layers of expectations on motherhood. One of them is also the way that you look. And I'm just like, I have grown as a person in my 7-8 years of parenting, and
you have substantially lowered your expectations of yourself and others and life in general.
And in so doing, Jesus has essentially taken the wheel. You know, should I clap? Where's my round?
This is how long, isn't it the blue one?
Those were some of my favorite moments when unexpectedly Charlene's in a fit of laughter and we have to wait, you know.
Listen, I have to tell you though that also, I mean, everybody who follows the show and watches and listens by now knows what an ugly emotional crier I am, and that it doesn't take much for me to get to that point. But I do particularly remember, and it's more recent, and I suppose it's also now because of the Oscars and everything going on, is the Barbie movie episode. And maybe because it's Barbie, maybe because I love the movie so much, but that episode will always stand out for me because the movie moved me. I'm obsessed with Barbie, and I have always been, and I am even more obsessed now with the conversation that this movie has brought about in the world and the things that it stands for. And I listened back to that episode not too long ago, just the other day, and I cried listening to myself cry on the show about remembering how I cried watching the movie. So those like almost like Inception level of cries.
I think I also loved that episode, and how, speaking of generosity, how generous we were in really picking at the scab of why it impacted us so much. And I think at the risk of, not at the risk, but in the hope that maybe we'll do the same, I want to open up. Did you want to say something else about the Barbie movie?
Not about the Barbie movie, but about your comments on generosity.
Yeah.
Something else that also will always stand out for me is, let it not be said that we're not generous and vulnerable about our very intimate personal details on this show.
That's
not just
true.
About parenting, but when I listen to the WAP episode and our other very well supported sex and intimacy episodes, always very well received, most listened to episodes to this day, and continues to grow. I mean, sex is a hot topic, and so
and I think
we're
the fact
very
that
generous
we're willing
in those.
to talk about those things where I'm like,
and
yeah,
I mean, sorry, husbands. Sorry, guys.
I'm shy because it's easy for me to talk about it with my friend.
Yes, when we're having coffee, we can talk about it.
But even when we're recording, it's almost like my brain is tricked into believing it's just me and you in the room.
Yes.
And then when people maybe approach me or email me or speak with me about it, I'm like, oh, God, you. And now it's extended to my kids' teachers that know these details about me, and I have to remind myself, Sam, you being generous. So they do know you. They do know this about you because you laid it out, and you laid it out for a reason. And I think there's never been a moment where someone has been ungrateful for me sharing whatever I've shared on this show.
And the fact of the matter is that it cannot be staged. Well, I suppose it can, but that's not this show.
That's not what
this
we
show
do.
is not that.
I don't know if we'd be able to do it.
No, I don't think so.
I do want to expose, because we have a life and relationship off camera, surprisingly, shockingly. Sorry that we don't share this with everybody, and I'm gonna pull it up. Earlier this year, and January is always a shit show. Funnily enough, also September, October, November, December are shit shows.
Just go back to the first year of this podcast, listeners, viewers, and the same theme will always reoccur around Red October and January. Raise away traveling.
Yeah.
Everyone has a fucking birthday.
And it was the first week of school, or like one of the first weeks of school. And I sent you this message. It's of a woman with her head just plastered on the table, like prostrate Barbie movie vibes, where you just like give up on life. I'm gonna just roll over
and
like,
I don't want to
give up. I'm done. And it says, "Can I come over and do this?" And then there's another one with, I forget who this actress is. She acts in Girls. This one.
Oh, I don't know her name. Yes.
She's a comedian. She's a comedian. I will find her name and I'll hook everybody up. But there's a thing of her, a meme of her going, "How am I? How am I?" Like, quote unquote, am? Yeah. How dare you even ask that? So that's how I felt in that moment. Like, anybody checking in on me, like, "Hi Sam, just checking in." Fuck off. What are you checking in on?
Yes,
this
exactly.
Disaster of a human.
And then also, don't check in on me. And I'm like, I have no support.
Yeah, exactly. And then one by Simon Holland, who's like quite a popular like dadfluencer. Hard to believe that tomorrow is already January 45th. It was just this like hardcore relatable like moment where I found all these memes and I'm just like, I'm gonna meme dump you. And
because you're too exhausted to put what you're feeling into actual words, and that's when memes are so helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, internet and technology, for giving us this wonderful thing.
And I think that you related in that moment, and then I was just like, oh, she's online. I'm gonna go further. I'd gotten an email, actually several emails, of people who had started work on the 8th of Jan.
Bright and cheerful, ready with a new lease on life, new year, new beginnings.
They'd been to the sea, they drank lots of cocktails.
They've got all their little plans for the year and
they made vision boards and did goal setting on the 1st of January.
To-do lists. And what are those things that you make in the beginning of the year? Resolutions. Yes. I don't even know what, I've forgotten the term. That's how I just don't use them anymore.
And I screenshot a few of those emails, of these very energetic emails, and I didn't start work probably until the 1st of March, if I'm honest with you. I'm like, my head is spinning because the beginning of January is Elijah's, like the day people went back to work this year was Elijah's birthday. And that is a lot of like work,
labor
in the lead up to just making this day special for this person. Often a solo parenting moment for me, January. And then
also he started grade 1 this year.
He started grade 1, which nobody warns you about. And I've told a couple of parents.
I feel like I did.
You did, no, you did. But it was like you were going through it when he was in grade. Elijah was in grade R, and that was also a school transition year. I feel like people need to be warned. What I'm saying is, not that you didn't warn me, but that nobody warned us when our kids were 1 and 2.
Yes.
And we were like, oh, this is hard. You don't want people to say, you have no idea.
I've seen
You don't
things.
want to be that guy.
Yes.
But you do. How do we like nicely tell people that things shift significantly in grade R and grade 1 that you don't expect because nobody talks about it?
I don't know. I don't think there's a silver bullet. The same way when you tell people that you're pregnant and they're like, oh, be prepared to never sleep again. That's basically the only
unhelpful.
thing. It's the only thing that people tell you, other than your like standard response of I'm so sorry. It's probably not the best way to go either, Sam. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Okay?
Are you okay?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of look.
Even if you tell people, Sam, they won't be able to grasp it until you're in it.
The time. You think you don't have time when your kids 1, 2, 3, but you're not sleeping then, so the trade-off's different. Here you might be able to get the sleep in, but the emotional labor that you have to put out just to regulate your kid, there's a lot more expectations on your child. They are involved in the world. We have spoken about like other people's kids, and in that episode we spoke about how you can be friends with like women you like, and the babies just kind of play side by side. But when your kid starts making friends,
then it's a different story.
Interacting with a teacher that expects output from them. It's not play school.
No. And also, like, I mean, we went to Cape Town recently to run a race, and we sat until some ungodly hour having a conversation about grade 1 homework. So there's nothing that can prepare you for any stage of childhood or parenting the same way nothing can really prepare you for having a newborn baby. It's so multifaceted that I don't think anything can ever prepare you.
Maybe I should say this. If you have not yet reached the stage or you're in it, and maybe it's also to help myself feel better about me, don't beat yourself up if you start the year in March, and don't beat yourself up if you end the year in September.
And you perpetually, during that time, feel as though you're on the back foot.
Yes.
Because that is your life now.
And it's normal.
Yes.
Because we're all going through it. So I think maybe that's the message I need to put out, is if you find yourself not... It's not
feeling
even
like you have your shit together ever. That is just the status quo for the foreseeable future. And so lower your expectations. Do not fucking compare yourself to Instagram or the mom next to you who looks like she's got her shit together, because chances are she probably has her shit together in some areas, but others not so much.
Yes. So I'm very grateful that we have one another, that we have this podcast, that I was able to screenshot emails to you and be like, look at this energy.
This is exhausting. I'm exhausted just reading this.
Why do I feel like such a failure? I felt like a failure as a mom. I felt like a failure as a person in my work and in my job. I'm like, I'm dropping all these balls.
Why don't I have a better handle on this? I'm not a new parent. Surely I should know what I'm doing by now.
And you said something. You said, why is this our life? And I said, because we are mothers. And somehow it's both the most important and least important job in the world.
Yeah.
And that was, normally it's you dropping truth and wisdom bombs. But when I wrote that, I was like,
I said
damn
what
it.
I fucking said.
It's fucking true.
Yes.
Because for the people that needed shit still till this week, I've had people like, I've had to provide copy for imagery, in my writing, and they've just gone ahead and created it. I've had to update social media. Somebody else updated it. And I was just like, could you guys, I'm getting to, it's on my list.
I'll get there.
And people are just doing the shit ahead of me because I'm not getting there, because I'm dropping all the balls,
and
right?
it makes you feel shit.
Feel
Because you're like,
But and I can't say to work people, my kids have sucked up a lot of my time this week, and
I've
I owed
needed
that
to be
them.
present, yes.
But by the same token, I can't not meet my children's needs because then I'm a bad mom. It's this both and thing again of this motherhood. It's the most important job, and it really is the most important job because we frame society. We feed tiny humans who become adults into the world. We parents in general are the ones nurturing the future of our society. If we're really going to get philosophical about it, that's the bottom line.
Yes.
What we do is the most important job
In the world.
But how about maybe you give me a fucking chance to do my most important job in the world?
Yes.
But I don't
that
get
no
that
one's
chance.
paying me for.
Yeah.
I think I shared just this week on Instagram, it's an old viral video of a guy doing a job interview with various candidates, and he says, so this is the requirement, this is the criteria, and he talks about things like you'll often need to work overtime, you'll be working with a very demanding associate who will not ever appreciate what it is that you are putting in, and you'll be required to work ridiculous hours.
You won't
Sometimes
sit down all day long.
You won't sit down all day long. You don't get any breaks. You don't get, and so then these interviewees ask questions, and they're like, "Is that even legal?" And he goes into depth about what this position entails, and eventually it gets to a point where they're like, "I just." How is that? There are people who do this. And then he's like, yes, there are people who do this. And I don't know if you'll believe me, but they do this for no remuneration whatsoever. And then these interviewees just like burst out laughing. And they're like, what do you mean? People do that? They work that job for free? And then he says, mothers do this job. And then everybody's like, oh, okay. And it's kind of that like penny drop moment where everyone's you come to the realization you already knew these things, but you never saw it in that context. And then you're like, oh, mothers are the greatest. They are the greatest. They're also fucking strung out, exhausted, underappreciated, undervalued human beings just trying to get through life. So don't be a dick to us.
Yeah, and that's us. That's us. And there's new levels unlocked. I think there's also like, in the journey of our podcast, in all 6 years that we've been doing this, we've come from parenting really small children, and there's been an evolution now where we're really trying to talk about ways of and think about ways of doing right by our older children now that they're bigger and they're people with their own minds and hearts and wants and needs and insecurities, and while juggling our own. It feels like there's new levels unlocked, and I never want to be that guy who's just like, just wait until. So hopefully we can just be those people who hold mothers' hands throughout all of this. And I feel like a lot that's mirrored in the way that we've journeyed is how we communicate our interior lives. That generosity that we give, we're also just, we don't have all the right answers, but we're exposing our interior lives in a very big way.
We won't be having these conversations still to this day if we had all the answers. And the truth of the matter is, as each level gets unlocked, new questions arise. New uncharted territory happens, and we are figuring it out as we go. And so I guess these conversations are really just about helping ourselves feel less alone.
Yeah.
And also whoever tunes in or is listening, you might know someone who said something to you the other day that you either found not relatable or you didn't have the answer to. And like, hey, Sam and Charlene said this very thing just the other day. So just so you know, you're not a crazy, random weirdo. You're just a human being.
And I think that this journey, right, and this being human and trying to find those, because there have been certain moms that I've like, hey, here is my podcast. I know you have a newborn. These are some of the episodes we did. Some I haven't heard back. Others have gone back and listened to all of our episodes. And so that's content creation, right? You win some, you lose some. So those who resonate with us, we are here for you. We will continue to be here for you. And someone who's journeyed with us and which we touch on is Ashley Audrain. We interviewed her last year when her latest book came out, The Whispers. It just is testament as well to like how we struggle to sit in these chairs, to get to a point where we can sit in these chairs. It's been a while since we recorded the interview that we're about to play. But I love that it was earmarked for our 100th episode, such a milestone, because 3 years back we interviewed her after her first book, The Push, which echoed the experience of new motherhood, whereas The Whispers echoes the experiences of mothers in the thick of
who are already
life.
Somewhere down the line in this parenting journey. So
stay tuned, everybody, because here is Ashley Audrain 3 years after we first interviewed her for The Push, and we chat about her new book and her journey around writing that new book, The Whispers. Before we move on to our next segment, we wanted to chat a little bit more about this episode's sponsor, Timeless Wellness.
So Sam, you know Timeless Wellness is a great online space to go to for Pilates and rebounding lessons, and it elevates your mind, body and soul.
Right, you can be a beginner, have no idea what you're doing when it comes to Pilates or rebounding, or you can be an old seasoned pro. Timeless Wellness's classes are expert-led. It's a platform with programs that cater to all levels, offering the perfect balance of strength, flexibility, and rejuvenation.
Okay, so basically you can say goodbye to that hectic gym routine and schedules, and then you can just slot into a convenient at-home workout that fits seamlessly into your lifestyle. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying. Personally, I can also vouch for it because, even though we have all the time in the world for all those hectic gym workouts, come 2020, we were not allowed into the gym.
Anyway.
And Yulette, who runs the classes, was there for me. She was pregnant at the time as well and helped me through my pregnancy journey, listening to all my aches and pains, meeting me at my fitness level and keeping me fit and healthy as I was leading into my postpartum period and beyond. She really did guide me every step of the way, and I'm super grateful for the Timeless Wellness platform just for that transition into new motherhood second time around.
So if our listeners want to join Timeless Wellness, if you want to join the community, you can go today to www.timelesswellness.co.za and you can get ready to embark on your journey for a healthier, happier you.
Today on The Great Equalizer and TGE's current read, we welcome back New York Times best-selling author Ashley Audrain, whose #1 best-selling debut, The Push, broke countless barriers for millions of mothers across the world.
The Push has been translated into 38 languages with a limited television series currently in development.
And while we've been patiently waiting for this limited TV series to come to fruition, we've had the great pleasure of inhaling Ashley's second novel, The Whispers.
She joins us now on the line to chat about her latest installment and all the various insights it has on what it means to be a woman in modern-day suburbia. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm just thrilled to chat with you guys again.
Back. And Ashley, we were talking about, before we go into The Whispers, which is just like, this novel blew my mind. We were talking off mic about the fact that I was 4 months postpartum when we last spoke. Your little girl, Waverly, was 3, and now my 4-month-old is 3. It's
wild.
just, it is wild. I think Oscar, your eldest, he was 6 months when you started writing The Push.
Mm-hmm.
He is how old now?
He is 8 now. 8, which is crazy.
Just time has flown, and I love how we are an audience of mothers growing with you, growing with your and growing with your novels. Because this hit me, I don't know, Charlene.
It grips you. It's so, I mean, as if The Push wasn't gripping enough, then it's just so relatable.
So I was postpartum in The Push when I read The Push, and I was like, feeling all those feels, and we're gonna get into the Whispers and exactly how it just is so relatable on so many levels. But I do want to talk about firstly the epigraph, because this, I've gotten into Rachel Cusk this year, and so when I opened this book, I was like, Ashley, we've got so much to talk about. Your epigraph. What I increasingly feel, she said in an interview with the Globe and Mail in 2012, what I increasingly feel in marriage and in motherhood was that what I increasingly felt, in marriage and in motherhood was that to live as a woman and to live as a feminist were two different and possibly irreconcilable things.
Yeah.
And, tell me about why did you use that epigraph?
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for all those kind words. I appreciate all of that so much. And also, I can't believe that we were talking about The Push when you were 4 months postpartum. I apologize for that, because I do remember it being a wonderful conversation, but that must have been quite intense for you. But that epigraph, even you just reading it there, it gives me sort of this almost like a shiver, because of the truth, I think, that is in that statement. And, so I was well underway writing the book. I think I was probably going through revisions at the time for The Whispers. And I had picked up Rachel Cusk's book, A Life's Work, which is about motherhood, about sort of her, like it's sort of auto fiction, sort of a different kind of, a really beautiful, very literary kind of exploration of motherhood. And she also had, later on had a work that she was vilified for, which was a book about the end of her marriage. I don't know if you've read that as well.
I've read Outline. What was that?
Yeah.
So the start of the trilogy.
Oh, so sorry. Outline was different. Outline was the start of her trilogy, but she had the title's escaping me right now, but we can put it in the notes maybe. But she had another book that was sort of a slightly sort of like auto fiction sort of take on the end of her marriage, and she was really vilified for that at the time that it came out. And so I was reading all of these works by Rachel Cusk, and then deep diving after, as sometimes we do on an author. Sometimes you finish a book and you think, like, those books were older by then. They were like 10, 15 years old, maybe more. And then I wanted to go back and just read all of the interviews she did about them and all the reviews that they had and all the big newspapers. And the Globe and Mail is the national newspaper in Canada where I am. I'm from Toronto. So I was reading that interview with Rachel Cusk about the book in the Globe and Mail. And that statement really just stopped me in my tracks completely, because I thought, oh my God, like that, and it was so much about what I was writing about, in The Whispers. It really captured so much about, I think, the internal conflicts that all of my characters were having. And it really spoke to me. And I think what is so jarring about that statement that there does become this huge discrepancy between how we think about ourselves as feminists and the role that we might play every day as mother and wife. Because I thought, God, I really do consider myself a very strong-minded feminist, and I always have. And I always gravitated to that thinking and those studies and, all of that through my 20s, and into my 30s as well. And I really identified so strongly as that, the ideals and all of it. And then I think now, I'm 41 now, and I was, late 30s, and I was writing this book about women at this stage in life that we are all at. And I just kept thinking, God, when you look at how much choice we actually feel like we do have in our lives now about the performance that we feel we must put on every day, about the true inequality that we have in even the best of our relationships, even the best of our marriages. All of that felt so contrary, to the way that I thought I would feel at this point in my life, and so that really spoke to me. And I feel like it resonates with a lot of people. And, it's not, I think it's important to say that it's not a commentary on like our husbands or our, the partners that we're with, or because I think, I'm very lucky to have like an insanely supportive partner who does so much and, really like does take on a lot of the emotional labor and all of that. But still, it
society
is a larger...
and reality, and
Yes.
it just is what it. We always on this show, Sam and I often say, in fact, it's part of our intro on the show, is that we did not marry arseholes. We didn't.
Yeah.
They're great. We didn't marry arseholes, but life, man.
Life
it's
and
systemic.
society. And
It's systemic. And yeah, this is, I said in the last interview with you back in 2021 that you would be perfect as a third host. Were you based in Joburg, we would be like, you have no choice. You got to come and sit in studio with us.
Yes.
Because there is just so much synergy here. And look, you do cover it all in The Whisper. So let's talk about what the book is about. And funnily enough, I listened to that episode again today, and it's so exciting because it was 2021. It was like you were in this period of promoting the push, but you were doing reworks on The Whispers. And you gave us like a rundown of what this book was about. And we spoke about this kind of weird perimenopausal area in life, and where you find yourself when you're settled, quote unquote settled. So let me leave it to you. You're the expert on your own book. What is The Whispers all about for those who don't yet know?
Oh, thanks. Wow, that's so crazy thinking back just time and yeah. Yes, so The Whispers is about 4 neighboring women who live on Harlow Street. And they don't quite realize the ways in which their lives are all connected until there's a tragedy that happens on the street one night involving one of the families. And that tragedy sort of acts as this thread, that's pulled, that then unravels all of these families' lives in different ways. And then they do, in fact, realize how their families are quite connected in ways that they hadn't realized. And so we sort of get, through various timelines, we sort of get this very intense sort of 3 days of, the son of one of these families in hospital, trying to recover from this injury that he has. And one of the mothers, Whitney, is just sort of, in vigil at his bedside. She cannot leave. She won't speak to anybody. She doesn't want to see anybody. And we really get sort of the interior in her mind of kind of what has, happened and how she feels about motherhood and how she feels about her son. And then we sort of get this sort of inside look into the families around her, the best friend, the doctor who lives across the street, who, helped her son when he came in. And then, of course, we have a really interesting woman in her 80s, who's next door. And Mara, she sort of acts as this voyeur, of all of these families as things are sort of unraveling. So it's very much a book that sort of sits, I think, in the territory of the push in terms of, the themes of motherhood and marriage, a little more friendship, a little more female friendship in this one, I think. But I think I was writing about, families and women that were sort of at at the next little step of life up from the push, and your kids are a little bit older and everything's a little more established. But you're sort of forced to really think about your life in a different way, than you did when you were just making the decision to have children and settle down. Mm-hmm.
So in the push, you deal with, there's that stage in new motherhood where you're looking, and this happens to, I'm getting mixed up between Blair and Blythe in the push. Blythe is sitting in the coffee shop and looking at other mothers and going, can you just, let's all admit how hard this is. Is nobody, in this disconnect? And I totally feel that. And then you, as you say, you take it a step further in the Whispers, where there's these settled families. I think, is it Aiden, Blair's husband?
Yes.
So Blair and Aiden, yeah, you did say, Blair and Aiden have not as Swisher House, or is it as Whitney and Jacob?
That's right.
And so they're kind of Whitney and Jacob are the couple to aspire to. Whitney's this career woman. And what I love is it's so realistic in terms of like the different types of families you can get on the same street, the different relationship dynamics, the different types of mothering, and that's also like really what you get into. And what I loved about these characters is every now and then you're like, okay, this is the good guy, this in the beginning, right?
Yes, you're like,
this
okay,
is the
who
good
am
guy,
I siding with?
who you always have to side with someone, but Ashley, no, she doesn't allow us this.
No, because in the 1 minute you're reading and you're like, okay, I can see where this character's coming from, and then you're like, oh, shame. Okay, I feel you, and then and then you're kind of angry at the one character, or you kind of not resentful, but you kind of like, that's wrong, that's not right. And then in the next minute, when you're in the next chapter reading about the next character, you're like, oh, but I feel that too.
It's nuance, it's gray areas, it's the messiness of motherhood and reality. So I want to talk about Blair and Whitney, because they are. There is a third mother, or excuse me, there's a third woman. Also a mother, depending on how you look at your definition of motherhood. There's a third woman on the street, Rebecca, who's the doctor, who happens to be Xavier's doctor. So can we reveal what, for the purposes of the discussion, Xavier falls from a window. Yeah. And it's like every mother's nightmare. You've played into every mother's deepest, what do you call them? Like intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, like your biggest fear. And if you think about the things that you, as a mom, you should be aware of safety and have by now, especially at this stage. I mean, you're not dealing with babies anymore. You should know parenting, and you should know what are dangers around little kids. And it can so easily happen to any of us.
So that's like, okay, we are living this nightmare. Cool. And then Rebecca happens to be the doctor who takes on Xavier when he gets to the hospital. He's in a coma. And we get to know Blair and Whitney a little bit more. Xavier is Whitney's son. Whitney's the mom in the hospital. And you get to learn their mothering styles. And they're so easily identifiable and not as stereotypes, just as real people. So talk to us a little bit more about that, the difference between Blair and Whitney, and how you use that kind of as a device to say something about different types of mothering in society.
Oh, yeah. I love talking about this because, and actually I'll back up just 1 second and tell you, just validate exactly what you were saying about fear and those intrusive thoughts, or that catastrophic thinking, because the idea for this child falling out of this window of his bedroom came from my son's bedroom. We lived in this house.
Ooh, and that gave me chills. That just gave me chills.
It's so funny when things, like, as writers, things sort of in real life all tend to work, for certain things kind of work their way as little seeds in a book, and then become something else. And we moved in just before my son was born, our first child. We moved into this old Victorian house in Little Portugal here in Toronto, and he had it was his nursery at the time. So but we had just moved in, and there was this big, tall, long window that went very close to the floor. And there was no lock on the window, and there was also no screen. And so the window, like the glass of the window just sort of opened. It faced the street, not the backyard, but it would just sort of face the street. And of course he was an infant and he was in a crib, and it wasn't a concern for like a year, because he could never have accessed it for that long. But every single day, and without a lie, every single day that I walked into his nursery, I had that thought of, oh my God, what if like the window and this child, and what if I don't fix it right, and what if he all of these things, thinking of him as a toddler and then a child, and so I think that is such an inherent part of motherhood, the constant fear, the constant worry. And of course, in my books, I'm always writing to the fear of motherhood, the fear, I think, that really unites us all in so many ways. And so, yes, I just had to validate that when you were talking about those intrusive thoughts, because that's exactly where that plot point came from. And I almost felt like by putting it in the book, I didn't have to worry about it anymore, because
Did it work?
Happen.
Did it work?
Catharsis almost.
It was.
Wow.
So it's sort of interesting. But back to your great question about Whitney and Blair. Yes. So these two characters were, I developed them completely for this reason of sort of showing and exploring this contrast between mothers and the way we mother. And, they are friends because they live across the street from each other, and because their children are friends. Whitney has a son who is eventually involved in the accident, as you say, and then Blair has a daughter who's a year younger, but they're very friendly. And I just thought, and in my own life, I can see, you do become friends with other mothers sometimes just out of circumstance. They may not be the sort of woman that you instantly connect with, or the friend that you would pick out of a crowd sort of thing, but your proximity, in life and with your children bond you.
And Chloe and Xavier are best friends.
Yes, exactly.
And that's in later in motherhood. I mean, with babies, you're like, moms who I gel with, we're gonna hang together.
But then your kids don't vibe. And then
And when your kid starts making friends, you're like, that mom is so awkward. Do you have to be friends with that kid too? I can't
so
talk to her. I can't think of a realistic situation where this has happened, but it does crop up that you're just like, can you gravitate towards that mom's kid, because I like that mom.
It's true. And so often with my kids, I find myself, trying to like force these little friendships, because that's the mom you want to hang out with. And it so rarely works that way, but it's quite funny. But
so Chloe and Xavier, Whitney and Blair's kids are friends, and they live on the same street. So it's situational.
Yes. And they do like each other. I mean, we see sort of their initial meeting, and Blair really reaches out to Whitney and realizes that she's somebody early days with her twins that sort of needs help. And I think there's something very genuine about them, but they're very different. They are so different. And Whitney is, as you mentioned, Whitney is very career focused. She's the kind of mother who would rather stay late, at the office, getting ready for the next day or working on a presentation, than she would come home, and do bedtime and bath time and all the things that we end up walking into the door to, at the end of the day. And she mothering, nurturing, all of that does not come easy to her. And she really has this sort of trigger, especially with her son. She has a son and then she has younger twins. But her son especially really ignites something in her. He really knows how to push her buttons, and he does. And he's not quite the kid that she wants him to be. She is very driven by success and achievement and perception and all of these things. And this child kind of is not playing into that, that hand that she has. And then the opposite, of course, is Blair, who is very much this sort of, I think of her as the sort of martyr mother, a mother who really, she has given up a lot. She's sort of given up most things in her life to take care of her daughter. She has one daughter, and really has given herself to the role of like, I'm going to take care of this family. And she's very good at it. She is very, very good at that. And she's recognized for being good at that. And so much of that becomes her identity, but she is sort of facing this time in life, she's 40, she's kind of looking around and she's thinking like, why do I feel so empty? Why I'm doing all the things. I've got this wonderful daughter. I've, got this marriage. I've got this home. I've got these friendships, all these things, but but nothing feels right. And so she starts to kind of look to see, okay, where can I point the finger at what's wrong? And she really points the finger at her marriage, right? She points the finger at her husband and her marriage, and she knows there's something that's not right there that's contributing to her unhappiness. But she also just is feeling a lack of direction and focus and fulfillment in general. So there's a lot emotionally that plagues Blair, and she doesn't want to face any of it because the consequences are so scary. And so I think so that these two women act as sort of a foil to one another, just in terms of how they mother. And I think what I really wanted to get at, and I had fun writing about, was just this idea of envy. This idea that you know the other like they both envy so much in each other, and the thing that they envy about each other is the thing that they know they are missing and they desperately want. And yet they really are, for purposes of their own self-confidence and ego and perception and all of it, performance, all of that stuff, they really lean into the thing that they know they are good at.
They're good at, yes. As though they are confident in their identity and they don't actually have any of those doubts. On the outside, what it seems like to the people or the world, but when you really get into the character, they reveal those things about themselves, and you realize there's lots of insecurity there, actually.
Exactly that. And that's what was so fun to write about with the two of them. And I think so true to life. Like, I think that power imbalance and that shifting of power between friends is so true to life sometimes.
Also because there's power dynamics, right? So Whitney has sway in the world. As a feminist, as a strong woman, she's got the wardrobe, she's got the body, she's got the sexy husband, she's got the house, she's got the company, the career, she's living the dream. Out in the world, what a powerhouse. But on the school ground, on the playground, among the moms, that's where Blair holds all the cards and all the territory.
Clout, yeah, because she's the leader of the pack in that sphere, basically.
Yeah, and it's what's nice about the two of them is I thought initially, like, are they frenemies?
Yes, I also got that sense.
Somewhat. There's like a little bit of a sense of that, but then also like there's honesty without them saying anything to one another.
They do genuinely seem to care about each other.
Yeah, so they do live in that nuance, and yeah, you're right. It's exactly that. It's envy, and I want to talk about that because they're both in this, and it speaks to exactly to what you're saying in the epigraph, or what Rachel Cusk is saying in the epigraph. Here are these very different women, two women who took like different paths essentially, and it's also like they're on opposite ends of a really expansive way that you can mother and work at the same time, or not, or do the work of mothering, however you want to look at it as a woman, and the difficulty of that. And I think it speaks a lot for me to this time of life. Like, we're talking about settled in suburbia, the fallacy of the white picket fence life. And I, without sounding judgmental, but I've spoken about it before. Monica Heisey wrote a great book. She doesn't have children, but she wrote a great book. And now I've forgotten the name, about getting divorced in your 20s.
I can't remember the name either, but I know exactly the book you're talking about. Yes.
I'm okay. I'm okay. Really, or is it? I will look it up.
Something like that.
I will look it up now, and I'll do Monica Heisey justice. She was on the show, and we were talking about how when you get to this point of you've made these decisions in life, you're settled, and especially now when you start having kids and your kids are older, and you're out of the like muck of new motherhood.
Really good, actually.
Really good, actually. Thank you, Charlene. Monica Heisey is really good, actually. It's hilarious, that book. And I did chat to her about how I'm finding so many people in my life having trouble with their marriages, their identity, and getting divorced or doing crazy things. So we've like bypassed midlife crises. And it's not only dads having the midlife crisis, buying the Porsche, the Harley, or whatever. That's like the trope, right? That a man would get a what do you call it? plugs or something to cover his bald spot. Like, it would be a man going through this crisis, but you're seeing it happening for both.
Boomer man. It's so generational, right? That's like the boomer male trope. Yes. And our generation is just so different.
And also women having affairs,
right.
or like married women mothers having affairs or other relationships. So I'm starting to see it, I mean, not to the point of what would happen in fiction or in movies or in pop culture.
No, but in real life.
But I'm seeing it in real life that like people are making really whack, crazy decisions.
Different decisions.
Different. Sometimes it's crazy. Sometimes it's like, what are you doing? And maybe it's coming out as judgmental, but it's like, it's like there's a panic. And I would say, come on, I went back to school. That's crazy. That's crazy.
It's different. It is different, I will say. But you have a tendency to overdo things, Sam.
But there's a loss of identity. There's something happening to our generation as we reach these like mid-30s, going into our 40s. So I see it happening here. And Mara is the neighbor who's
the older character.
And she's kind of looking on and being like,
looking at the shit show. And she's just like, you see? Look at you all squirm.
Exactly.
So what, and also Rebecca, who's running out of time. She's the one in the group, the doctor, who's struggling to conceive. So, I mean, what do you make of that? Is it really, it is happening, right? And it's showing up in our pop culture references and in our books and in our TV shows, movies. This midlife, can we call it a midlife crisis now?
I don't know.
Yeah, I love this topic. I love this topic, and I love talking about it and thinking about it because I think everything you're saying is so accurate. And we did have this idea that was, whether it was how often it really happened or whether it was just sort of this trope that spoke for so much, we had this idea of this kind of male midlife crisis that our parents' generation had, right? It's like the boomer midlife crisis. And I think, and you know what, there's actually a really great, it's back in March, Jessica Gross. Do you know Jessica Gross? She sort of writes for the New York Times about, and she's a writer about parenting, or, all kinds of things, parenting, marriage, all of this. And she wrote an excellent, like, deep dive on this idea of like, what is our generation doing with the midlife crisis? Like, what does that look like? How are we handling it? And it was such a great, insightful piece. But she talks in there about, which I think is so true, about how, like, really our generation right now, who is kind of going through this, we have been through like a larger societal crisis over and over and over again in our lives. Like our generation really hasn't had that really stable period on a larger scale, right? In which you could have that sort of tropey midlife crisis. Yes. We're always kind of coming. We're always dealing with crisis. We're dealing with, most recently pandemic. So many of us were just kind of, starting adulthood with 9/11, like, the recession, like on the .com bust, all of that has affected our lives so greatly, and really financially. And I think that, I talk about it a bit in this book, but I think there really is a place for like a larger conversation about how finances impact all of this so greatly. And I think for so many of us in this generation, we're having our families so much later now, right? Like, I have many friends who are just approaching 40 or have just turned 40, and they're still having babies, and some of them are having their first, and their families are still so young. And the generations before us, like people our age, like their kids were like, they were staring at being empty nesters pretty soon, right? Mm-hmm. Like things were, everything was, that shift in having a family later impacts everything so deeply, because for us at this point in midlife, like we are still in the thick of it. We're sort of still in the muck. Right. And we see these characters in this book, like sort of looking around and thinking, like, especially someone like Blair, who, she only has one child. And so I think she feels judgment about that. Like people looking at her thinking, well, you only have one child and she's growing up. So now what are you going to do with your life? Like now, where is your value? But financially, like she can't just like up, totally dig up the foundation of her life and start again. She doesn't feel like she could. Like she has many other options, and we sort of see Whitney in the same thing, even though she lives a more affluent lifestyle, compared to the other characters in the book. Like she is so tied to the churn of like having to provide for the family and everyone still needing everything so greatly and so deeply. at these ages. And so I think all of those things kind of play into what is our midlife crisis now, which I think what you're saying, Sam, is so right. I think we are seeing that, especially post-pandemic. I think we can see it in people we know. We maybe can identify it in ways in ourselves. And I think it's, instead of this uprooting our lives, like, peace out, I'm leaving the family, a midlife crisis, I think it's more of this like deep emotional reckoning with like who we are. Who are we in this world? Like, are we the people that we thought we would be when we felt like strong feminists in our 20s and early 30s? And so often, for I would say almost most of the women that I know, the answer is no. The answer is, I am not who I thought I would be. I don't feel the way I wanted to feel. I don't identify as the woman that I always thought I would identify as. And so the question then becomes, like, what do you do?
Yes.
What do you
How
do?
do you come,
right?
like, do I just come to terms with that and accept it? And is that okay, who I have become? Or do I feel that I still need to be more?
And exactly that. And what do you owe yourself, versus what do you owe this family that you've created?
Yes.
And sometimes the answer to those questions are very different things. And so how do you reconcile that? Like, I think a lot of women I know at this stage are trying to reconcile that. What do I need? What do I want? What do I owe this family I've created that still needs me so desperately? And I just think the answers are tricky, and there's sacrifice no matter what. There's an element of sacrifice no matter what. And I think that's really what Whitney and Blair and the other characters, but really Whitney and Blair are going through, is saying, like, what am I willing to sacrifice? And what am I willing to just have at any cost, and there's no right answer, right?
No, there's no silver bullet. There's no solution. There's just this big mirror that you're looking into, and you're like, okay, so this is where we're at.
Like us, Whitney and Blair, were these little girls, and you bring in their moms again.
Yes.
Same as what you did in the push. So there's this pattern of generational trauma, and I was looking at it. Actually posted this yesterday without thinking about today's interview. Daughters of mothers who didn't look after themselves can become mothers who don't look after themselves, and so the cycle continues. And I mean, I was just at my therapist last week, and she was like, who are you putting first? Who are you looking, who are you thinking about when you wake up in the morning? Are you thinking, what does Sam need today? And that's so nice to always come back to that, but it's a nice idea.
Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah. I love that for her.
It's hard, and you see these women with their mothers that are trying to, and there's nuance there, because I think there's where Blythe was more inclined to be like, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to be the best mom. I think that Whitney and Blair kind of want to do things opposite to their moms, but also have a little bit more empathy for their mothers than what Blythe had for hers in the push. And I see that journey I've taken the same way, that when you first have a baby, you struggle so much, you come to terms with your own upbringing, and you almost in your head fighting against the way you were raised every day, and then you live that motherhood a little bit longer and start to acknowledge ways in which your mother sacrificed. So again, the generational trauma plays a part. And for me, there's a part where Blair is, by societal standards, the quote unquote better mom, because she's more present, because Whitney, there's an instance where Whitney, and this happens in the very beginning, in the backyard, in front of everyone. Totally awkward, shattering moment where Whitney loses it and shouts at Xavier. And for some, I think it's that's awful. And for others, and I'm putting up my hand, I can relate.
I was just going to say, Whitney pulls a Charlene at a party. And then
and it's a scandal almost. And that's where the whispers start. It's and you know what I did? I circled every mention of whispers in the book.
Oh wow.
And it's not just about like,
I
well,
was just
so in
gonna say,
South
it's
Africa,
not just people whispering. It's
Yeah.
I love the title of this book and how it is a golden thread throughout.
so good.
Because
Thank you.
it's the whispers in our selves. It's how we whisper these ideas and thoughts to ourselves, and how those thoughts, we betray ourselves sometimes with these thoughts.
And I'm not sure if it's intentional, Ashley, but there's one part where Xavier whispers to his mom.
Yeah.
Yes.
It runs so deep and it's so beautiful. It really is a golden thread. It's so well crafted, well done. But there's a part in the book.
much.
There's a part in the book where Blair is saying, and I think it's in retaliation to her being treated a certain way by Whitney. And her, at times you can identify this as a mom where you get treated like crap by another mom and you're like, well, at least I don't do that. And at least I don't do that. And then Blair kind of goes off on a tangent saying, I am a good person. I'm a good mom and I sacrifice. And she falls right into the trap of being this martyr.
Yes.
So like I say, by societal standards, she's the good mom. She, speaks in a certain way to Chloe. She's never raised her voice. She's also great with Xavier. The two of them are almost friends.
It comes across as very nurturing and like the typical societal idea that you would expect of a good mother.
She's gentle. She never puts herself first. She always puts her family first. She's the Pinterest picture perfect mom. She's always wearing dusty old holy leggings.
Yeah.
She feels like crap about herself, but she's the quote-unquote good mom. Then at the same time, Chloe at one point in the book walks in on her crying, and she covers it up. And I think it was in another podcast that you mentioned thinking about Waverly and this. And Charlene and I had a big cry in a couple of episodes back about the Barbie movie and about how that line, how mothers stand still so we can look back, so that
when their daughters look back, they can see how far
they've come. And so I want to let's talk about that trope of good, what it means to be a good mother, what it means to do the right things, to be gentle, nurturing, caring, all of those things, and what we're doing to our good girls.
You're hitting on all the things I love talking about the most. All your questions. And I'm thinking so much about this now. I mean, for so many reasons. We can get into this after, but sort of the thing I'm writing right now, working on right now, is very much about this idea of good women and being good. I think so much about that. And I think so much about it, with my daughter, because I agree with you. I agree with you, Charlene. Everything you're saying, in that sense that when we have that scene where Whitney really loses it and has this real episode of maternal rage, like I can totally relate to that as well. That to me is like a little bit like, oh, I've been a little too close to that, at times. For sure. And then also, so I relate so much to Whitney, and I relate so much to Blair, as well. And just this idea of wanting to raise, I'll speak specifically about daughters, but wanting to raise daughters it to be a certain way, but also that a way that I am comfortable with, but also recognizing that in doing that, in trying to make her like I think I should be, I am doing her a disservice of who she is going to think that she has to be in the world. And I think about it all the time, and it really kind of breaks my heart because I'm so aware of the pattern of the thing that I am doing, and I don't want her to feel like I do. I don't want her to grow up and feel like she needs to be quote unquote good and conform to a way, all the burdens that we carry as women around our behaviors. I don't want her to carry the same burdens around her behaviors that I do, but I see myself projecting it on her all the time. And I think it's a lot of times it's as simple as the language we use with our daughters, and in contrast to the ways we speak to our sons. I have a son and a daughter, so there's a lot of sort of me thinking of the contrast in the way that I'm speaking to them both. But it's that idea of us saying, oh, you're rewarding, oh, you're such a good girl. Oh, you're being such a good girl for mommy, or hushing her voice if she's being too loud, or
Even the way they play with their dolls. Like, I find myself oftentimes when Jessie's playing with her doll in a certain way and she'll come and show me, she'll say, oh, Mommy, look, I changed my dolly's nappy, or I did this. And then I'll be like, oh, you're such a good mommy. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be putting her in this box or giving her this frame of reference, because maybe she should decide what a good mom looks like. Maybe I should let her show me or tell me what she thinks a good mom is, rather than, oh, your baby's crying, you dropped everything and rushed to your baby, or like, you know.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. I've had so many of those moments too. And even the way we talk about like what the rest of their lives are going to look like, I don't think that we ever, like and this is not like a slam against our parents, because I know we're all doing the best, but like I don't think that there was never any doubt that you were gonna grow up and follow a certain path, you know. And with my daughter now, like sometimes I'll always challenge the pretend play or the thinking or the talking to say like, well, maybe you're not going to have any children. Maybe you're not, you know, maybe you're not going to have any babies. And oh, well, maybe you're not going to get married, and maybe you're going to live by yourself, or maybe you're going to live with your friends, or maybe you're going to live with another woman, or, you know, whatever it is. Like it's getting rid of all of that stuff that's so drilled in their head.
The stereotypes of this is what the typical individual looks like, or this is the path that your life will follow. Yes, 100%.
And there's, you know, on this topic, there's a book, and I don't know if you've read this, but I think you would both love it. It's by Elise Lunan, and it's called On Our Best Behavior. And she used to be the content officer at Goop. She used to do the Goop podcast. And this is kind of her she did a bunch of ghostwriting, and this is her, she has a podcast called Pulling the Thread, which is very good as well. But this book is her first, it is nonfiction, but it's very memoir-ish, like lots of personal examples and personal stories. And On Our Best Behavior refers to that burden that we as women carry to like behave in very specific ways. And she bases each chapter in the book on one of the 7 deadly sins.
It says the 7 deadly sins and the price women pay to be good.
Yes, that's the subtitle. Yeah. And that book, I listened to it on audio, and like the amount of times that I had to pause and just take notes, like just write things down to like think of later, and like because it so brilliantly captures everything that I think about with my daughter and in my writing and with myself. You know, and I mean, it plays in very much present in the whispers too, even with this idea of like desire, you know, and hunger, and like all of the wanting that we do as women, you know, and again, kind of relates back to our daughters too, like the suppressing the wanting in them for things, and the little displays of what we might see as greed, you know, that aren't really greed. It's just them expressing what they want, you know, and things like that. So yeah, it's such an interesting intellectual challenge as a parent to try to have that top of mind.
Intellectual challenge is exactly the right term, because it feels like hard work constantly. And you're talking about suppression. I'm looking at my notes here to touch base with you on, I wrote here, voicing what women silence. And Whitney has a display of rage. I spoke with recently with Mina sorry, I always want to say Mina Dubin, but it's Mina Dubin, on her book Rage, the everyday crisis, or the everyday crisis of modern motherhood, I think is what it's called. But she, in a similar fashion, it's a nonfiction, and she gives examples, and she pooled like a bunch of women from all over the world, really, to talk about why we are so
angry,
such an angry generation of mothers. And it's I mean, Whitney could have been one of the people that Minna had spoken to.
But then also in the book, Aiden at some point says to Blair, doesn't he, why are you so angry all the time?
It says to Blair.
Yes, Aiden's Blair's husband. He says to her, why are you so angry all the time?
Because she's grown resentful of him as well. But it's taboo to be a rageful mother. It's taboo to be yelling, and it's also taboo to suffer as a mom, and to be ungrateful, and to not acknowledge that you're #blessed. We are #blessed, but and we are #blessed
and also gutful entirely.
Yeah. So Ashley, at this point, would you mind reading for us from a very early chapter in the book? This is where Rebecca, the doctor, who is trying to conceive with her husband Ben, and she also lives on the street, and she's also she's busy because she's got a really trying schedule as a doctor, and so not in the fold, and she's also not yet a mother with a child, a physical child in the outside world. So she's not in the mode of Whitney and Blair with them. So kind of is outside, but there is a point where she accepts Xavier when he arrives at the hospital, and she needs to break the news to Whitney of what's happening, and that's this scene. But there's a lot going on here, so yeah, if you wouldn't mind reading for us.
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you. So this is Rebecca and Whitney in the hospital together just after the accident has happened. Rebecca reaches for Whitney's other hand. Her fingers are cold and curled into a fist. Whitney pulls back, but Rebecca squeezes her firmly until she gives in. Rebecca isn't intimidated by much, but there was something about Whitney when they first met. Her verve, her polish, the astuteness of her words when she spoke. But over time, as their lives quietly orbited each other's, that effect wore off. There's a strong sense of familiarity about someone whose life shares such close physical proximity, given all of the possible coordinates on the planet. She and Whitney breathe from the same tiny pocket of air. She sees her garbage cans on Wednesdays and knows they don't recycle everything they could. She knows she has a shopping habit, sees the stacks of packages teetering at the front door, nice department stores, courier bags left for the nanny to collect. She knows one of them, either Whitney or Jacob, doesn't sleep well. Rebecca sees the kitchen lights flick on when she comes home in the middle of the night. She sees the empty wine bottles and the transparent blue recycling bags. The backyard party isn't the only time she's heard Whitney yell. Right through those towering panes of glass at the front of her home, the unmistakable pitch of a mother who has had enough. She felt unsettled every time she heard, like she had at the barbecue, embarrassed to have heard her. What else happens in that house, she isn't sure, but that kind of speculation makes her uncomfortable. She is a doctor, and what she cares about are facts. She finds comfort in facts. Xavier has a significant injury. We're worried about his head. He's in the ICU in a medical-induced coma to rest his brain. They're going to talk to you there about what to expect for the next little bit, okay? In situations like this, we learn a lot in the first 72 hours. I know this is hard to hear, Whitney, but I need you to understand. There's a possibility he might not regain consciousness. Whitney's unmoved. Rebecca pauses to soften her voice. Do you understand? She feels Whitney's hand begin to quiver, and she looks closely at her striking face, the tight sheen of her forehead, her microbladed eyebrows, of the outward perfection. Is Jacob with the twins? Whitney closes her eyes and shakes her head. London, for work. Our nanny came over right away, but I had to wait for her. Her voice curls. I couldn't go with them in the ambulance. Rebecca tells Whitney she'll take her to see him now, that he's intubated and there is swelling, that this might frighten her, but he's not in any pain. Another doctor will have to take over from there. The door slides open behind them, and Rebecca turns to see a nurse with 2 police officers. They'll want to speak with Whitney. It's routine. Rebecca registers the discomfort of this, although the questions they'll need to ask don't concern her, not technically. Rebecca shakes her head in the direction. Please, please, not now, not yet. And the nurse guides the officers down the hallway instead. There are studies that show patients in this condition know when family members are with them, so you can hold his hand and talk to him, like you would if he was awake, okay? Whitney stands and gathers the hem of her sweatshirt in her hands. She lets Rebecca slip her strong, steadying arm under her as they walk down the hall, until Whitney becomes rigid. She turns her face towards Rebecca, and their eyes meet for the first time. Is this why you don't have children? Rebecca pauses. She doesn't know what to say. This job, this hospital, this constant fear of something going wrong, the unbearable pain if it does. She thinks of the hours she has spent on the floor of her bathroom, the bloody orbs sinking to the bottom of toilet bowls, the dancing strings of mucus, the weight of the hand towel on her lap on the way to the hospital. Why doesn't she have children? Because she cannot keep her own alive.
Chills, thank you so much. And that was a long piece, but there's so much in there. A lot of discomfort, a lot of shame about Whitney shouting and this undercurrent of what might she have done. What could have happened to Xavier? You know, and I was in the hospital last year or the year before with my toddler, with Noah, who cut his chin, and I felt it's law. The doctors have to ask you what happened and if he passed out and if this happens regularly. I felt like such a bad mom, and I felt, you know, they could put me away. If he continues, and he's a bull in a china shop, he's a crazy kid. If this happens and it continues to happen, and do I go to a different emergency room? Because I felt interrogated. There was shame there. Similarly, then the extract goes on to talk about Rebecca's shame, things we don't talk about, miscarriages we don't talk about. So in the push, you opened up a lot about childbirth. And in a way that we've never really read before. And now, the heartbreak of miscarriage. So you're leaning in to the discomfort and giving, I think there's a bit of catharsis there, but also giving readers like the ick, like, I can't. I'm sure there are some readers that were like, you know what, I need to look away. There's a lot of triggers here, and I'm going to close up here. So, I mean, we know why, as the Great Equalizer, we go into those icky discomforts, the icky discomforts, I suppose. Why? Yeah. What is it for you? Why do you do it?
Oh, yeah. You know, there's several reasons why I want to sort of go there on the page with things like childbirth and pregnancy loss and in the whispers. You know, interestingly, so I was once before I had my son, and then twice sort of in between both of my children, I had miscarriages as well. And I remember thinking the first time, especially, which was my very first pregnancy, I remember thinking as I was sort of going through that, you know, like losing the pregnancy and the physical pain of it, and what to do next, who to see, where to go, like all of it, every bit of it, emotionally as well. I remember thinking, like, why does this feel so foreign to me? You know, and of course it's a new experience for your body. It's going to feel strange and different, but in a way that really stumped me, like in a way that made me feel like, why do I, like, I'm an educated person with many resources and all of this, and why do I feel like I don't even know what to do? And I realized after that experience that the reason I really had no idea what this was going to be like or what to do is because I had never ever seen or read or really even heard a portrayal of what that experience is like. And it really shocked me when I had that realization that I'd never read about it in a book. I had never seen it play out on a screen. It is one of those experiences for women that, you know, the screen goes black and you open to 3 weeks down the road, or, you're reading about it happening in the past tense to a character who has experienced it in the past, but never experiences it on the page, you know, in that way. And that really stuck with me. And now, of course, I wanted to write about it. I wanted to just sort of
be truthful about it.
Be truthful, explore what the real emotions are and the physicality of it, which I think is so important. And it makes me think that, and I to be honest, I don't feel like I'm doing it as like a service to anybody, but it does make me think that, you know, if there's a woman who reads scenes like this, and then one day it happens to them, I hope that there is a sense of like, oh no, this is normal. This is how this feels. This is how this happens. It is hard and difficult and traumatizing and all the things, but this is what happens.
And it's more common than we realize.
Yeah. And I think I hope that maybe it takes a bit of the loneliness out of what that situation is, because it is such a difficult thing to talk about Rebecca's looking back on this series of lost pregnancies that she's had. And she can get pregnant, but she can't stay pregnant. So she has these recurrent miscarriage. And she's not, the other thing is she's not really given much of a diagnosis or much of a plan of what to do next, which is very typical for women who are having fertility problems so often, right? Which many of us know, like so often you're sitting across from a doctor, and that doctor can only say to you, you know, I'm so sorry. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know why this is happening. We don't know what the problem is. And so often women have to leave those offices with a message of just hope, and miracles happen and you never know, and keep trying. And that's all we can say. And what an insanely frustrating thing. And so much of that comes down to a lack of, you know, funding and research and all of that in women's health, which is such a bigger conversation and bigger problem. But I thought, wow, how interesting for a character like Rebecca, you know, who has devoted her life to science. She is a doctor. She's a very specialized doctor who is saving other people's children all the time. And how especially devastating for someone like her, so guided by fact and reason, to have to sit across from another doctor telling her they don't have any information or answers for her. Because all she can do is have hope, but she works in a world where she's trying to quell other people's hope. Yeah, so that's such an interesting contrast to me. But yeah, I think, you know, you mentioned the uncomfortable, and I think in both of these books, and probably in every book I will ever write, I feel like I gravitate towards that place of uncomfortableness as women, and the things that we aren't supposed to feel, but we all do, and we aren't supposed to do, but we all think of, and you know, all of that stuff. Yeah, I guess it's just that's just what I am fascinated by.
We're right there with you, and you know, I write a lot about sexual and reproductive health rights. And I mean, I wanted to bring up that statistic, and I can't think, like the formation of the clitoris, like how it mirrors the penis. That was like very recent, like in the 2010s, that it's really like people are not understanding, scientists, because of that lack of funding that you mentioned, because of just a lack of interest in women's bodies, other than, you know,
but we
obvious.
Birthed the nations. This doesn't make sense. To me.
It doesn't make sense. But it's only in the 1990s, you know, that drugs were trialed on women. Drugs were. I literally just heard this today. I was listening to another podcast today, and they had just said, and I could not believe that, because hormones and other things in women's health were too much of a factor that they couldn't overcome in a trial. It's insane. Trialing drugs on women because of exactly that, because of our hormonal fluctuations.
No, it blows my mind.
Trialing it on men? That doesn't make sense.
It never even occurred to me until Sam discussed these statistics with me as well. My mind was blown. I was like, this cannot be true.
And there's a lot of things we still don't know exactly why women miscarry. Why not? Why not?
Why don't we know this yet?
This out? You know, there would be so many answers for women who blame themselves. You know, and what happens? Were you drinking?
Yes.
Did you? I can't tell you how many women
were you exercising too much?
I had those headache pills before I knew I was pregnant. It was probably that. And they blame themselves, and they live with this hurt and this regret. And why? Because of the systemic issues that underpin the way women are seen in this world. And that's why we sit in the discomfort, Ashley. And that's also why we won't reveal the ending. But there were one or two very early readers that before I had read The Whispers, that were like, no, it's no, I know. They just were like, no. And I was like, okay, all right, because the push, you know, was fantastic, 5-star read. I was interested in this. Really, it was a handful of readers, so I hope you don't take that to heart.
No, not at all.
Then when I read it, I was like, that's why. Because you are a thriller genre reader. You wanted a tidy ending. You wanted all the answers, but guess what? Ashley's not giving you all the answers because we don't have them. So I feel like, and I wrote this in a review for News 24, that The Whispers transcends the push in terms of genre. That the push, and there's nothing wrong with genre writing, don't get me wrong, but the push is a psychological thriller. I know that that's initially not how you intended. You didn't go out to write a thriller, but it ended up being like a what is actually happening?
Yes.
What is going
Messes
on?
with your
Is
mind
this
kind of thing,
is this
yes.
all in Blythe's head? Right. That's where the push was. The Whispers transcends into literary fiction, literary thriller.
Yes.
Because it's so nuanced. You cannot every character is a protagonist and an anti-hero, and it's got a satisfying ending, but an untidy one. Because life is messy. So, and I think that plays right into, hey, these are the systemic issues. We spoke about how Barbie just holds a mirror up to society. Barbie offers no solutions. In our viewing of it, it offered no solutions. And I feel like the Whispers in the same way is just, hey, here's a mirror image of an everyday neighborhood. Take from that what you will.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that, because that is, I love that read of it. Thank you. And that means a lot to me. Yes, I am not interested in a tidy ending. I am just not. I am not interested in tying things up. I am not interested in giving the ending that will feel good, because that's not life, and that's not how things work, and that's not always how it is. And I would rather leave my reader with something to think about, and I would rather leave myself as a writer with something to think about as I'm writing and as I'm ending something. And I know that frustrates people. I know that can frustrate readers. But I think that's just a different kind of reading experience. And there are all kinds of different reading experiences you can have. And I want to write one that's that ends like this does and ends like the push does. And maybe I always will. I don't know. But yeah, I think that with the thriller, with this idea of, I don't, if you're as you said, sort of thriller genre reader, I think that if you expect that kind of coming to either of my books, you'll be disappointed with sort of structure or sort of the things that we come to expect from those great books.
Yeah, predictability aspect of that, yes.
Yeah, I don't think about that when I'm writing. I don't try to follow any rules of what a reader wants. I don't try to follow any convention of a genre at all. I just write the book that I want to write, or what's kind of coming to me, or the story that I want to tell. Especially with the Whispers, I think, if people, I think the real big difference that I can see now that I wasn't kind of definitely was not intentional with at the time, is that the thing that happens right away at the beginning of the book, that thing. And so there's no looming, like, what is going to happen, there is sort of emotionally, on like an emotional and psychological level, what is going to happen to these people emotionally and psychologically, but there's no like scary thing threatening them all that's going to happen. And that, I think, is what's different. I hope that where it does satisfy readers of thrillers is that it is pacey. I hope that it's like a page turning, that sort of page turning quality. I hope my books always have, and I really want to deliver that to readers. So yeah, I think I'm happy with my books kind of sitting somewhere else, somewhere that touches a bunch of these different categories we've talked to, but nothing quite squarely.
There is one instance where you leave it on a cliffhanger. I can't remember which chapter it was, and I mentioned it on Instagram. I'm like, how, what? I gasped out loud. I'm like, why would you do this to me? I've got to now see what happens. It's just, and then and then more comes and more unravels. There is very much an unraveling. But life also goes on. It's really well done, and I must applaud you as a writer as well for just going with where you want to with it. And I'm sure. Well, let me ask you: were there any, not detractors, but kind of maybe commenters, early readers of the initial draft that went, maybe if you do this with this character, or would you consider this plot point? Was there anything that you were like vehemently against, that you just said, no, I'm doing it this way, and this is why I need to stick to my guns?
Oh yeah, there were conversations along the way for sure about like people kind of pushing back on certain elements that I sort of fought to keep, the book as was. And one of those, a couple of those, one was, we had many conversations about the miscarriages and the pregnancy loss, and good, useful conversations about how much to include and what should be on the page. And the experience for readers. And ultimately, I felt like it was done in a way that was sensitive and a way that was realistic. And so those are in there, those are in the book. And the other, actually, one thing that I really had to work hard to make work in order to keep was Mara's storyline, because she is as you mentioned, sort of this 80-year-old neighbor, and her perspectives are all in the mix. And she has a very different storyline, because most of her, she sort of, she is quite pivotal to the plot, but she is sort of watching and sort of judging these other mothers. And most of her chapters are sort of backstory, or sort of flashbacks to her thinking about her life when she was the ages of these women living on this same street in this same house. And we sort of get more information about like her dear son and her husband. And she's going through her own sort of quiet tragedy in the background that nobody really sees. And Mara's storyline was much weaker. Like her character and her storyline was much weaker all throughout the revisions, like throughout early drafts. But in my mind, she was so strong, she just wasn't coming across on the page quite like that. And I remember my editors sort of saying, like, maybe we need to get rid of Mara. Like, maybe she's just not adding enough.
Wow.
And she's not doing enough. Yeah, because she was much weaker in those versions. And I remember sort of having this time of like, okay, I get one more shot, one more revision of like trying to keep Mara, like trying to save Mara, because in my mind, she was so much more fully formed, than she was on the page. And so there were things like that. And I think just sort of I have these 3 brilliant editors who we all work together, like they work together as kind of like a team with me. And they are so smart. And whenever they push back on something or they think something's not working, like they're always right. They're always right. And to me, that's more of a challenge to like, okay, if I want to keep it or it's important to me, then I just need to step it up, like step up those things to keep them,
Pushes to make you better or make it better. Yes. So that's a great dynamic. That's, I guess, what you need.
You really, really do. And a huge thing that comes up, because I think a lot of writers will say this, that it is so hard to recognize the pacing of your own novel. And it's really hard to see where tension is and where like the clues, like, we're trying to give readers clues to come along with us on this journey, like, to hook them in and keep things tense. And when you have spent so much time with your draft, you can't see that anymore. Like it is impossible. And so you really do need that feedback from other people and from really great editors to help you see, like, where is it weak? Where can it be stronger? So a lot of the work that I did with the editors through revisions was on pace and having that page turning quality and lining up the reveals in a way that was really satisfying, hopefully, to the reader.
It was.
Oh, thank you. So all of that stuff kind of comes after the content's there, like the texture of all the stories and everything, the characters there, but then you're trying to deliver an experience, a reading experience that is nuanced and playing with things like where you end a chapter and how things line up with each other and timing and all of that stuff is a lot. It's detailed work, that you need to do as a team, I think. Yeah.
I'm so glad you saved Mara. I'm so glad because she's, you're kind of also looking ahead. Mara, she's different in that she's an immigrant and she comes from Portugal. And also that's a nod to your stay in Little Portugal in Toronto,
that's
right? So I'm so glad you kept her. But it is kind of looking at an older generation and feeling that I resonated so much with that judgment as well, Mara's judgment.
Yes.
And feeling the eyes of this woman on you and going like, what must I look like to a mother who has been through it and that I think I know everything. And so it's a good dynamic. I'm so glad you saved her, and well done to you and your editors.
Thank you.
The Whispers is fantastic. It's a 5-star read for me.
Yeah.
And I don't like giving stars, Ashley, because people have their preferred genres. So I don't like giving stars, but The Whispers is a 5-star read for me. I will recommend it to anyone I know, especially any mother I know. And I would love to know what you are working on now.
Oh, yeah. So it's such early days. I can't even talk about it because I feel like it's too like jumbled up right now. But it is I feel like it's for the same kind of reader in a lot of the same territory. And what I will say is kind of what I said before about really being focused on that idea of the good girl, the good girl and the good woman and what it means to be good and the burden and pressures we carry to be good in the world. And how do we fight against that? How do we live with that? And what happens when that's challenged? So that's sort of what I've been thinking. The thoughts, those are the thoughts I've been obsessed with as I'm working away on this draft of the third book. Yeah.
I love it.
It's been fun.
I love it. Well done to you. I've loved our discussion again. I'm so glad that we got to touch base. Hey, Charlene.
Yeah, these conversations never disappoint. Your books never disappoint. I am grateful and excited.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, thank you to you too. I just have the best conversations with you. I enjoy speaking with you so much and interacting with you online on social media and stuff back and forth. And I just appreciate you both have such a thoughtful read of my work, and that's such a gift. So thank you.
Oh, and how fortuitous that this is the 100th episode of the Great Equalizer that we're celebrating.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because congratulations.
Thank you. We've come a long way in talking about dark motherhood. That was the title of our first our first interview with you. And now moving on to the whispers and that inner dialogue of who we are as women, and we look forward to moving forward with you in our motherhood journey in your next work. So Ashley Audrain, again, it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you, Charlene, for 100 plus and counting beautiful episodes.
Thank you. I'm not going to cry. Don't you make me cry now with this. This is not supposed to be an emotional... Okay, let me just gather myself.
Well, I want to say this while you gather yourself. Do you know how much talking that is? Because it's 100 episodes.
What do you mean it's a lot of talking? I talk.
It's not half an hour episodes or 10-minute episodes.
No, and this is something that I often question us about. Like, is it too much talking? Like, do moms have time to listen to this?
You know what? It's something we need. So on my cell phone, I'm going to pull up my cell phone here. I've got as my backdrop, as a writer, write the story you need to read. And that's always also been our motto in recording this podcast.
Tell the story.
Episode,
have the conversation that you need to have.
Have the conversation you need to have. And you know what? Like, we need to have the conversations that we don't come and sit here and like pull shit out of our
What are we going to talk about this week?
And you know what else? And you know what else? And you know what else?
It's like it bottlenecks. It's like our experiences as the weeks progress, like bottlenecks into this, like, we need an outlet for this. We need to get back into studio. We need to talk about this.
Yes. And I think when it came to that motherhood being at once the most important job in the world and the least important job in the world, and that duality of motherhood, it's just this recurring theme that crops up, and I don't think that we're going to change it.
No, I don't foresee us finding any groundbreaking solutions. We're not like trailblazers for life and motherhood and finding new ways. I guess the only thing that we are not trying to achieve is that we could hope to achieve is to just have moms feel a little bit less isolated, because just to also recap on the thought of the Ashley Audrain book, it doesn't matter where you are in your mothering journey, whether you're only starting out or whether you have been in parenting for some time, or what kind of family you are parenting in, whether it's a blended family or not. There are going to be challenges that we as mothers and parents face at any given time that someone has already been through or is yet to go through and can find relatable or synergy with. No matter who you are as a person, we're facing so many similar struggles every day.
So I'm reading this book up. That's what I was pulling up while you said that, and it made me think of this book by Angela Garbs called Like a Mother, where she kind of goes through the science and cultural evolution of pregnancy from a feminist perspective. And she writes, and this is talking about pregnancy in the early days, but I think it touches on exactly what you're saying. For all the physical changes of pregnancy, Eventually, that baby leaves your body, stretching and scarring and altering it on its way out. The squishy ball of soft skin that was once inextricable from yours will gain the strength to crawl, then walk away from you. You are left with yourself, someone familiar, yet totally different. And in the same breath, she says, growing and birthing a child is an experience as individual as it is universal. And it speaks to a lot of what we continue to talk about on the show. This loneliness. We're not going to get away from feeling lonely in
never. You never. And even when you're in a big group of people with other moms who should be your like comrades, you know, you can feel so isolated and alone in that space just because you feel like my experience doesn't look like your experience seems to be going.
And the whole thing about being left with yourself, someone familiar yet totally different, is something I fear. My kids growing up, becoming people who I hope are the people that I wish for them to be, happy in themselves, and all my other dreams for my children, which I know are my dreams, but maybe for their dreams to be realized and for them to just be happy individuals, but they are going to leave me. And who am I then?
Why are you going to do this to me now?
I'm sorry. Would it have been our 100th episode if it wasn't for that? That's why we're here. We're not trying to figure out, maybe we're not even trying to figure out parenting or our kids. We're trying to figure out who will be. Because those people are people. We're persons too. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It's true.
How about we keep talking?
I agree. I'm gonna swallow my tears now.
I'm gonna use my feet to get my tissues that I found on the floor.
The reason we have these conversations and I can bawl my eyes out is because we want to engage with you. We want to keep talking. We want you to weigh in on these conversations. Whatever it is that you're feeling. And when we get those voice notes from you, Sam shared a voice note with me from a listener the other day that was just like, she was bawling and then she was laughing and all of the things. And so that's what we want to keep doing. Hit us up over email or WhatsApp, drop us a line, share with us your experiences, your thoughts, just get in touch.
You can DM us a voice note on Instagram if you don't have our numbers, or you can record one on your phone and pop us an email, info@thegreatequalizer.co.za.
Also, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because that's where you see us now in person, and it's nice, and we have all of these beautiful cameras that can show you my tears and my makeup running down my face. So please go check us out, watch us on YouTube, and subscribe and like.
For those who have been with us for 100 episodes, and for new listeners who are joining us, your support is so important to us. And really, every like, love, comment, share, teary, laughing voice note we get means the world to us.
Even the angry ones where you disagree with us. So please go and write us a review. Please only write good reviews. We only want good reviews. No, I'm kidding. Please go and write us a review on Apple Podcasts and rate us on Facebook if you can. Every like, every heart, every share, it makes a difference to the algorithm, yes, and it does put our name out there more, but it also helps us reach a greater audience, and it's important to us because that means more moms can feel a little bit less alone. So whatever your poison, find us there, and please leave us a review.
And hit the subscribe button because that's how you learn of episodes before everybody else hears about them. Louder for the people at the back: YouTube, Apple Pods, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, even TikTok. Twitter's been neglected, but we will soldier on because we are consistent and we come back to the damn table. Twitter, sorry, X.
I wasn't going to correct you.
Excuse me. In all seriousness, every single interaction brings one mom closer to sanity, and that's why we do what we do.
Exactly. And the more we're seen, the better this podcast will do and the better we'll be for you.
And so that's it for this week until episode 101. Keep your mom game strong. That's it.
Shout out to our producers over at Autumn Aperture and our studios, including our editor, Tyler McKenna, and sound engineer, Stephen Krill. Please review our show notes for more on today's topic and expert guest. And for more on the Great Equalizer, our website is always a good idea, www.thegreatequalizer.co.za, along with our social media platforms on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, now YouTube, and TikTok. And of course, if you want to chat with Sam or Charlene directly, email us at info@thegreatequalizer.co.za. We would love to hear from you.